Many experts have emphasized the current vetting of Brett Kavanaugh is not a criminal trial. It's a job interview.
This isn't a criminal trial. This is a job interview for the highest court in the land.
And this isn't a court of law. This is a job interview for one of the most powerful jobs in the country.
It's not about a condemnation or a criminal trial about Kavanaugh's guilt or innocence. This is a job interview.
And even if the FBI is not checking with dozens of people who know Kavanaugh, just like other job interviews, the references are out there, and some of them are pulling their support, like law school classmates who knew Kavanaugh back in the day and supported him as recently as August. Former classmate Mark Osler says it's not his old memories of Kavanaugh moving him, but Kavanaugh's total lack of judicial temperament at last week's hearing. Attorney Mark Osler joins me on the beat. And Mark, since you cite Kavanaugh's angry demeanor in your decision, let's start there. Take a look.
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit. Revenge on behalf of the Clintons.
Mark, what about that performance made you pull your public support for Kavanaugh, your law school classmate?
Yeah, you just played the exchange with my senator, Amy Klobuchar, and that is something that really struck me. It's the way he treated a co-equal branch of government. That in a world where we're lacking civility in a lot of places, one that it needs to be maintained is at that highest level between the branches of government. And there we saw an encounter that is far from what we hoped for.
Did you know that side of him?
No, I didn't, frankly, and I was surprised. I sat and watched on my computer, and more than anything, my first emotion was to feel sad that it was different than what I knew. Before I signed the initial letter, in fact, I reached out to some of the people that I knew who practiced in front of that court, the Circuit Court for the District of Columbia. And they reported that he was fair, that he was thoughtful, that he hired good clerks. And that's part of the reason I signed the initial letter. What we saw in the hearing was something that cut against those recommendations.
Stay with me, Mark. I also want to bring in Caddy Kay, an anchor for BBC News in Washington, who's been covering this story. Caddy, what Mark is describing is the mask falling to some degree with Judge Kavanaugh in that dramatic hearing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We don't have other reports prior to this confirmation process of people saying that Judge Kavanaugh had a terrible temper or was rude or interrupted in that way. That just hasn't come up from other reports. But the other thing that we're hearing from people who had supported Judge Kavanaugh and have now come out and said that they don't anymore is the combination of last Thursday's performance, the interrupting, and this issue of whether he is misrepresenting his past, particularly perhaps in the Fox News interview, where he paints himself as having had this background at high school that was totally focused on service and sports and just academics, and then the issue of the drinking. And I think that is causing some concern amongst some of his former classmates that he just isn't representing things as they really were.
And one of those former classmates, Mark, here, I want to ask you, when I play another thing that happened later in the hearing, and so much happened that it's hard to get your arms around all of it, even as days go by. There was a whole period where, apart from what one believes about the underlying allegations, where he became, and I don't use this word lightly, but he became, by the standards of a nominee being vetted, relatively mutinous against the process of at least the senators from one party, which is actually worse than if he became just wildly mutinous. He seemed both mutinous and partisanly so. And take a look at here, where he basically started refusing to answer questions from certain Democratic senators, among other things.
I've kept such calendar's diaries for the last 38 years.
Personally, do you think that's the best thing for us to do? You want to answer?
This is a circus. The consequences will extend long past my nomination. The consequences will be with us for decades.
You went to a pretty good law school. Can you think of other graduates from your class or people you knew who've gone on to big things, public things, who've acted that way in public?
No, I can't. And we have a number of classmates who have done wonderful things, and I can't. It's,
and you're talking
it's
about,
particularly disheartening.
Yale, I'm just I'm just an old school Cornell graduate, which is, as viewers may imagine, nothing close to Yale, which is the #1 law school in the country. You've got classmates who've gone on to big firms, government jobs. Some are judges, we both know. You're just, to be clear, saying what's on tape there, you haven't seen any of them act like that.
No, not in their public lives, not close to that, and certainly not in that kind of setting where it's most important to model civility.
Caddy?
I mean, I'm listening to Mark and hearing a sadness in his voice, and it must be very difficult for friends of Brett Kavanaugh's to see this, what they see as a transformation. And the comparison that I'm hearing both from Democrats and from some Republicans is with Clarence Thomas in 1991, when Clarence Thomas did get angry with the whole way and, famously called it a high-tech lynching. But he wasn't partisan in that anger. He was angry at the whole Senate. He wasn't directing it at one party or the other. And I think that is a distinction. Now, to put the other side, you have Republicans saying, look, the goalposts are being moved here. Initially, this was about sexual assault, and now it's his drinking. It's whether he's representing his childhood accurately, his high school years accurately, and none of that is fair. And they're doing a character. They're looking at his character issues now rather than just this issue of sexual assault.
Caddy Kay, reporting from Washington, and Mark Osler sharing a story that you said yourself was somewhat difficult. I appreciate both of you joining us. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.